Hi, I'm Tessa, a veteran educator working in the field of special education.
And I'm Kim, mom of 2 autistic boys and a late diagnosed autistic person myself.
And welcome to Totally Over the Spectrum, where we dive into embracing autism through understanding and support. Welcome to episode 8, Top 10 Debunks, my favorite episode so far. Take it away, Kim. You're going to give me your facts or misconceptions, and I'm going to debunk them, or at least try.
Okay. Let's go in full force and start with the number one. We'll talk about vaccines.
Wow, that was a huge controversial subject, okay? That had a lot of media presence, and eventually it died down and allowed a lot of the science to come to the surface to say that vaccines are not the cause of autism. So, and I think this gives us an opportunity to dive into the fact that we don't know exactly what causes autism, but the latest amount of research says that it is a genetically inherited trait, to which you can talk a little bit about.
Yeah, I love the science stuff. So there is a lot of research out there, which I have sifted through lovingly. And there is currently thought to be about 800 predisposition genes for autism. And predisposition gene just means, it doesn't mean you're going to be born with autism. It just means that if you have these collections of genes, you are more likely to be born with autism. And yeah, vaccines do not cause autism. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that original article, because it was one article, right? And it was from the 1990s. And it has since been retracted. And the medical degree of the author was revoked. And so I have a science degree. So I learned in university how to critically assess a journal article, right? And they're not all good. Just because they're published doesn't mean that they're well done.
Yeah. So you have to do your fact search on them.
You do.
Right?
So I scoured the web and I found this article that was written in the 1990s. It was
in the archives.
Yeah, it was. So one thing about this article is that the sample size that it looked at was 12 children. Just 12.
Okay.
Right? So a small sample size like that you can't extrapolate that to an entire population. Mm-hmm. Right? And of those 12 children, 8 of them had parents that said, I think that my kid developed gut issues and regression after having the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine. So it wasn't even like all vaccines. They was looking specifically at the MMR vaccine.
Okay.
Only. And they weren't saying that it caused autism. All of these kids already had a diagnosis of autism. So the original journal article was looking at whether they developed gut issues and had regressive behavior after having the vaccine.
Okay.
So you can see
totally different subject matter altogether.
Right. And you can see how this got I don't even know how it exploded into becoming all vaccines cause autism. Not true. So the premise of this journal article was based on anecdotal evidence from the parents.
Okay.
Right. And anecdotal evidence is evidence that you obtain through observation and personal experience. It is not scientific evidence, which can be verified objectively.
Okay.
Right? So
I agree.
It has its place, but it is not, you can't run with that and say, oh yes, parents found this, so this must be true. But I will say that anecdotal evidence from parents is worth investigating for sure, right? If you have enough parents coming and saying, hey, I noticed a thing, yeah, you should check it out, right? So they were already diagnosed with autism, and they said, hey, I noticed this correlation, right? The very last, I'm not going to talk too much about how the article was broken down and what they did. They did some really invasive procedures, which is just horrifying. The very last sentence, and I will give you a direct quote from this, the very last sentence in the conclusion says, further investigations are needed to examine the syndrome and its possible relation to this vaccine. So the article didn't even say for
It
sure.
is. Yep.
It just said, hey, this might be a correlation, maybe.
Yes.
And that was just blown into this big thing. Right?
Okay.
Okay, so since this article, there has been extensive research looking at the link between the MMR vaccine and regression and gut issues, right? So no one ever said vaccines cause autism. No one ever said that.
Okay.
I've looked at the National Health Services website in the UK, and they say right on their website that there is no evidence of any link between the MMR vaccine and autism. You'll find that same thing listed on the National Autistic Society in the UK. And the Hospital for Sick Kids in Toronto have a statement on their website that says, it is very clear that autism is not caused by vaccines. The initial paper published on this topic has been disproved. This claim has now been recognized as fraudulent and biased by the pursuit of class action lawsuits.
Wow. So that goes to tell you to the extent that this blew up.
Yeah. So there are studies now looking at 350,000 children, 1 million children, and there were studies done in Japan. Japan actually withdrew the MMR vaccine at one point in the 90s because of this, because people were decreasing out of fear getting the MMR vaccine. So there was a time in Japan where no one got the MMR.
Wow.
And they did not see
A decline.
a decline. Yeah.
Okay.
Right?
So, but there's still ongoing research onto what factors actually, trigger autism in a person. So that's still ongoing research, and they are also taking into consideration environmental factors.
Correct. Yes.
So you can't rule out, environment is a contributor. No, they're not. So they are looking into that, but they're a long way to going to finding out exactly what is the trigger for autism.
It's complicated, right?
It is.
There's not going to be one thing, right? We know for sure there's a high genetic component, but as for the environmental factors, yeah, they're looking into that. We don't know yet. We just don't know.
Yep. And 800, did you say?
Over 800 predisposition genes.
There you go. So that's a lot of sifting through.
It is. So
Okay.
debunked.
Number one. All right. Off the list.
So the second one is that autism is a childhood condition and you can outgrow it.
Well, I think you sitting across from me debunked this right the way through, because you got your official diagnosis in your 50s.
Yeah, at age 50.
So there you go. So debunk very quickly.
Yeah. You are definitely born with autism and you have it for the rest of your life. It's part of who you are, right? It's not like this separate thing. Like I couldn't tell you what parts of me are personality and what parts of me are autistic traits, because that is a part of who I am.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
And I think a lot of times people have the misconception that it is a childhood disease to begin with, rather than a disorder. It's because it's more visible at that age. And once you mature, you're given far better coping skills and strategies to help you understand and fit into the world around you. So I think the older you get, the better you get at who you are as a person with autism.
Yeah, and I think it goes a little bit beyond that as well. I know you're talking specifically about getting supports to help you manage your self-regulation, right?
Yep, absolutely.
But what also happens for someone like me when I didn't have a diagnosis was I got really good at hiding my autistic traits, right? Which is called masking, which is we know leads to other mental health issues. It can be extremely detrimental when you try to hide your autistic traits and try to fit into a sort of neurotypical world. So yeah, my hope is that we have more neurodiversity affirming language and acceptance out there so that people don't have to hide their autistic traits.
Yep. Absolutely. I agree with you.
So is it a childhood condition and you outgrow it? No.
Nope. No.
Absolutely not.
Unless you're starting to regress there, Kim, and not telling me.
I'm not telling you. Well, who knows? Number 3, autism can be cured.
Wow. Okay. I guess that's because people don't see it as a disease that you're going to catch. And that it is a childhood disease, as you put it, for, debunk number 2, instead of a disorder. And it is a neurological disorder. It's the way your brain is created and the neural pathways. It's not going to change. That is your building block. It is set in foundation. So I don't know how else to put this.
Yeah. So, autism is not a disease, right? It is a different. It is a different way that your brain works. There are a lot of people in the autistic community who would like to have that word disorder removed. So I had to Google the definition of disorder to understand why that's
there.
Yeah. And disorder is the definition is that disorder is an irregularity, a disturbance, or an interruption of normal function. So yeah, now I can see why disorder is not a great word choice there, because I function normally for me.
Yep.
Right? I function as a normal autistic person. Right? So it is a different operating system. It is not an abnormal one. So yeah, the word disorder is a little bit gross, right? But whether they're going to change that for their clinical definition or not, I don't know.
Yeah. So they're just putting it into a very clinical term. They're taking the emotion out of it. And this is what they're saying. If you do not meet the criteria to a neurotypical person and you're neurodivergent, then, you apply to a disorder versus the main.
Right. And I would really hope that we would move to this being considered a difference, and, we don't all have to be neurotypical.
Yep. Okay.
Like I said, autistic feel that autism is a big part of who they are, right? And a lot of us wouldn't want to change that.
Absolutely. And it'll be interesting to see if some of our listeners could give us feedback on what they think would be an appropriate name for that.
Yeah.
And
I like that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, we have some very unique approaches to this, and I'd love to see what comes out of people.
And that's not to say that, autistic people don't face challenges. Like, everyone has challenges. All people have challenges. And because autism affects every person differently, you need different strategies to support every individual.
Absolutely. All right. Debunked.
I will say that there are many false cures out there in the world. Like, there are false cures out there,
Yes.
right? Like, you have to be careful, right? Like, don't let fear guide the path that you're on.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do your due diligence on this, because, it's shocking at times to read articles and actually have parents share experiences with you on what avenues they have taken, believing it to be the most appropriate avenue at that time, and then, regretting it later on. So please, people, do your due diligence on what form of therapy you decide to take.
Yeah, and with that, I just wanted to go through and list some of the warning signs that you might see when you're considering a therapy to sort of be aware of.
Absolutely, go for it.
Anecdotal evidence. So we talked about that before. And that's when your service or therapy, I'm going to use those words loosely, provider uses personal stories and plays on your emotion to sell their product.
Stick to the facts.
Exactly. Evidence-based.
Yep, absolutely.
Lack of qualifications. So your therapist needs to be registered and they should freely give their registration number to you. You can visit the governing body website, right, and check to see if that person is listed. And that will usually tell you if what their status is, whether it's been their status has been revoked or whatever.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
So that's on there. So check their credentials to make sure that the provider is in fact a trained professional.
Excellent.
Look to see if this is for financial gain. Like if treatments or products are excessively expensive, that's a red flag.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a cost to everything. The person needs to be compensated for, their time, their efforts, their, strategies in which they help you put into place, but not to an excessive point where it's, it makes it not feasible for you to maintain that type of treatment.
Right. If you look at something like occupational therapy or speech and language, I think right now in 2024 in Canada, that's probably about around $160 for 45 minutes.
Okay.
Right. That's sort of a reasonable ballpark, you know?
Right.
Yeah. The next one, ignores scientific evidence. So if you have some knowledge of sort of that scientific evidence that's out there and you go to a service provider and they dismiss that evidence, which refutes their product or treatment, that is another red flag.
Okay. Absolutely. When you have science backing you, it's worth, and if there are many avenues of science, right? So just pay attention to what it is and how it's being presented to you and, what avenue is best for you.
Right. So if you go in saying, I know that vaccines do not cause autism and this person is trying to convince you that they do, right? Don't second guess yourself. You've done the work, you've done the legwork. We've got all this information on our website. You can go check it out. Don't let someone gaslight you into believing that what you know to be true is not.
Yep, absolutely.
And the last one that I have as a red flag is if they are offering a sort of cure-all, right? So if the provider claims that the autistic person has other conditions that have been missed, or that their product or service will treat everything.
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. It's not a one-stop shop over here.
It is not.
So I agree on that one.
So please talk to your registered healthcare professionals and look for evidence-based supports.
Excellent.
All right. Moving on to myth number 4. All autistic people have a special talent.
Well, as much as I'd really like to give you the evidence to support that debunk, my little heart says, yes, they do. And the reason I say that is because they're out-of-box thinkers, right? So for your neurotypical person, such as me, we're in the box thinkers, and neurodivergent people are out of the box thinkers. So you guys come up with such creative ways of achieving tasks that we go, oh, wow, that's a talent. So we use the word talent used loosely, but in your world, it's the norm. So in saying that, it creates that debunk. To you, it's normal. To us, it is not normal. Most, you do have a talent. But it also goes by define the meaning of talent in this case, because your perspective of talent and my perspective of talent could be very different.
I think you have really hit on the point of this idea. I think special talent, sometimes people use the word superpower, right? Which feels really like, oh, as an autistic person, I'm not going to live up to that sort of idea. Someone came up to me and said, oh, you're autistic, what's your superpower? Info dumping at you is not a superpower. I can't fly. It's not a superpower,
Nope.
So it can feel really terrible to have people say that to you. Or, with my youngest son, Peter, being non-speaking, they'll say, oh, well, sure, he's non-speaking, but what's his superpower? What can he do? He doesn't have a superpower, right? That's not a thing. Like, I just sort of wish, like, I don't want people to think that, autism is a terrible thing, but I also don't want them to think it's a superpower, right? A little more neutrality. It is just a difference. And I get what you're saying. I get how it can look to neurotypical people like a superpower,
Yep.
right? Like, I get how that...
Not many people can pick up on being pitch perfect like your son.
Yes.
And that's why I never sing with him, because I will be smacked several times by the time I finish one, chorus.
He doesn't like dissonance. That's true. He doesn't like it when people sing off key. And then for my oldest son, Alex, he was hyperlexic, right, as a child. So I have a great Alex story. He was 4, and he would just go up to random people and he would say, are you aware of the dangers of phosphates in the environment? And he would go on like a 20-minute info dump about the dangers of phosphates in the environment at the age of 4, right? So I get how he used like these really big words, and he did understand what he was saying. And some people were like, what is going on? And I had one woman completely enraptured by him. And I was like going to stop him, and she sort of gently put up her hand like, no, I'm good. And after he was done, she looked at me and she said, I'm in childcare. And she said, I have never had a 4-year-old come up to me and talk to me like that. She was just sort of blown away. So I get how that looks like a superpower for people. Yeah, but I think as an autistic person, I would rather that we have a little more neutrality.
And just say it's the norm for you.
Right?
Okay. All right. So in essence, it's kind of debunked, but I wish it couldn't be.
That's fair. Number 5. All autistic people have learning disabilities or intellectual disabilities. So intellectual disability is what we call it in Canada, and I think learning disability is what they call the same thing in the UK.
Absolutely. So I'm just going to rally that back onto you. And you have a what degree?
A science degree.
There you go. All right. So, wow. I'm not going to say that people with learning disabilities cannot achieve that goal. But when you apply the factor of learning disability, it means that there are, barriers in their ability to learn, and they have to have, alternative ways of learning to achieve the same goal. But to be able to achieve a higher level of learning, takes a long period of time. But would you consider yourself with a learning disability?
No.
Okay.
I had to, again, sort of find that definition for an intellectual disability, which is the brain's inability to store, process, retrieve, or communicate information.
Yep.
Okay, so we know that executive functioning can sometimes be a part of the of having autism. A lot of autistic people might have executive functioning deficits. I don't like the word deficits. Differences, difficulties, and oftentimes it may take us longer to process things, right? But taking longer to process something is not the same as being unable to process something.
Absolutely.
Right? Especially if I am in a face-to-face conversation with someone, that takes a lot of my resources to be able to do that. So if they then present me with something that I'm not expecting, I cannot process that in the moment, right? So, example, if you were to suddenly become upset, I might not be able to understand why you became upset, and I would have to go away and think about that for a while, and then puzzle that out, because it would be so overwhelming for me in the moment. There's no way I could think about what exactly just happened. Okay. So I do replay conversations quite often, and then go back and say, oh yeah, that's what happened there.
Okay. Alrighty. But in essence, debunked, because...
Yeah, that's not the same thing as having an intellectual disability.
Absolutely.
Number 6, autistic people are antisocial.
Ooh, my. I think I'd have to rally that to Alex as being a rather social person and an amazing dancer.
Amazing dance. Lots of autistic people are very social. Like, this is
Yes.
just such a weird misconception, right?
Yep. Here you are being social.
Right?
On social media. Get it?
Funny. We may struggle with social cues. That doesn't mean we don't enjoy social interactions.
Yep. I know you quite enjoy being part of my crazy family and
it.
the antics that go along with it. So,
That doesn't mean that I don't find social interaction to be exhausting. I'm also an introvert, so I recharge my battery by being alone, right? But there are a lot of extroverted autistic people who do recharge their battery being around people,
absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
So that is a complete myth. Number 7, autistic people have no emotions and can't have loving relationships.
Oh my. Hey, you're a trifactor in your family. There's there's Alex and now Peter. He is the most affectionate and empathetic kid you could ever come across. So, he is the quintessential poster of a kid that says, I'm loving and caring. So he is the number one child for debunking that.
So I kind of get where people are coming from with this one, because autistic people process things differently, and that can include emotions. We might have difficulty making eye contact. Some autistic people don't like to be hugged or kissed, right?
But that's a sensory aspect, right?
Right, but that's how neurotypical people show their emotions and their
Engage.
affections, right?
Absolutely.
So that can be really hard and discouraging for people, right? Like, you would say, "Oh, I love you. I'd like to give you a hug," and they're like, "No, thank you," right? So then you feel rejected.
Yep, absolutely.
So when you say Peter's very loving, but when he was really little, he didn't like to be kissed, right? If I would kiss him on the cheek, he would wipe it, right? It was a total sensory thing for him. And he didn't necessarily want to be cuddled or held either when he was little. Like he does now.
But that was what his sensory needs were at that time. It does not, reflect his emotional intelligence or his emotional ability.
That's the connection people are missing. Just because you're having a sensory issue doesn't mean that we equate it with our emotional.
Absolutely.
Right? So I remember when Peter gave me a kiss for the first time. He was 5, almost 6, and it was his first day of senior kindergarten, and I was holding him in my arms because he elopes. So it was just easier, when everybody's milling around trying to line up to go in on the first day, to just hold him. And he turned my head towards him, and he put his lips against mine, and he doesn't like pucker up for a kiss. It's just flat, right? Like his closed mouth, appropriate, but just lips against lips, right? And he turned and did that, and then he did it like a couple of times, and I could have cried. That was the first time ever that he gave me a kiss, and I couldn't really. No one would know. They're just, everybody's getting ready for the first day of school, so everything's chaos, and I just had this tiny little moment to myself in all of this chaos, like, wow. And there's, people wouldn't people take that for granted. Right?
And just sharing that story and getting emotional about it really reinforces your debunk.
Right? Yes, there you go. I also found some great examples of neurodivergent love languages online, which I had to share because I love this.
I love this. Okay, go for it.
So I have 5 of them from the National Autistic Society website in an article written by Awesomely Autistic.
Okay.
Okay? Number 1, love language. Info dumping. I love this so much. So info dumping basically is communicating a large amount of information about a specific topic in great detail.
Okay.
Right? And I know that some autistic people might not be able to withhold the info dumping, right? We sort of can learn to do that over time, but often we info dump when we feel safe to do that.
Okay.
So I love to info dump. Alex loves to info dump. We info dump on each other. He'll come up to me and say, I'd like to info dump about something. Are you okay to listen? I'm like, sure, lay it on me.
Okay.
Right? So that is definitely an autistic love language. Number 2, parallel play and body doubling. So that's sharing space together while doing different things.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, I get that.
Right? I love that. So
But that also applies to neurotypical people, right? Couples who are, have a great, good chemistry, have a good relationship, communication, can spend time together doing different things in the same environment. So, yeah. So
yeah, you can relate to this one.
absolutely.
This can also be an effective strategy when trying to help an autistic person when they're doing a non-preferred task. Right? So if I'm trying to cook and I don't feel like cooking, I'll sometimes say, Alex, can you come in the kitchen and sort of help or just sort of talk to me and keep me company? Or I'll talk on the phone with someone while I'm doing something that I don't really feel like doing.
Okay. Absolutely.
Number 3 is spoon sharing or support swapping. Are you familiar with spoon theory?
I am, but it's a no-go for me.
Okay.
Not even with my own kids. So sorry.
The spoon theory was a personal story written by Christine, I'm going to butcher her last name, Miserandrino, I think. It describes the idea of having limited energy and using spoons as a unit of energy. So you start off the morning with like 20 spoons, and that's your energy allotment for the day. And every time you do something, you're like giving a spoon away, right? Until you deplete your energy supply. So that's the idea. So spoon sharing and support swapping is sort of sharing our energy with people.
Yeah, my kids like suck my energy. They just take all my spoons all at once. So I'm like, no, I don't like spoon sharing with them.
No, thank you. That's a no thank you for you. Number 4 is please crush my soul back into my body. I kind of love that this is a thing. So that's basically talking about deep pressure, right? And Temple Grandin, your favorite person, invented the squeeze machine.
Absolutely.
To do just that,
Yeah,
right?
because she got it when she worked on the farm where she saw cattle when they were going to have any form of treatment to go into a device that once the head was through would then close and would give them a sense of comfort. And they would stop and they would calm. And she then created this very same machine and found that it was extremely beneficial for her.
Yeah. So there you go. I just love that they called it please crush my soul back into my body. And the last one, I also love this term, is penguin pebbling.
Okay.
Right? Are you familiar with penguins? So if penguins like each other, they'll give each other pebbles.
I
right?
know.
So the idea is that autistic people will share small gifts or memes with family and friends, and it's usually related to their dedicated interests. Right? And I think that's so sweet.
It is. And I'm just thinking of Happy with his little feet and, in a pebble.
And a pebble. Yeah. So I love that. It's like, oh, I found this great rock and I'd like to give it to you. I just think that's so great. All right. Yeah.
So, yeah, there you go.
Right.
Debunked,
Love languages.
Because you have your own love language here.
Exactly. So number 8, only boys are autistic. That's still a thing. People still think that's a thing.
Well, I can see why people think it's a thing because there are more boys that are autistic than girls. Because I think at one point there was, for every 4 autistic people, there was 1 girl to, and 3 boys. So the ratio was significantly higher. So I can see why people thought that. And I think more importantly, girls present very differently than boys, right? So girls present a little bit more neurotypical, where boys do not. So I think that's where a lot of people get, I can see where that, that originates from, that belief.
Yeah, you see a lot of high masking in girls, right? And you're right, it presents differently. So yeah, you got that 100%. The prevalence now is considered to be 2 to 1 or 3 to 1, depending on the literature.
Okay.
And I mean, I'm sure even that accuracy of those numbers is off because autism is so underdiagnosed.
Yes, it is. Absolutely.
Right?
Especially in women.
Exactly. So only boys are autistic. No. Hard no. Number 9, autism is becoming an epidemic?
That, I think research has come such a long way that we are becoming, yes, we have found that research has found that there's been a 110% increase in autism in the last 10 years. But it is also that we're becoming more aware of it. People are embracing it. And the diagnosis is becoming far more effective and accurate. And I think you combine all of those factors together, and I think you will be able to see why there is an increase.
Yeah, you absolutely nailed it. It also takes like older people like me getting a diagnosis, right? It's not just kids. So as your older generation also gets diagnosed, you now have a rapid increase in number, right?
Absolutely.
And you have to remember that when they first started talking about autism, like I think it was 1940s or something, it was for very few people. Like I think I forget the guy's name because names are hard, but it was the guy John Hopkins was like the world leader in diagnosing autism, and he made a point of saying, you know, I turn away 9 out of 10 people. He didn't think that autism could have a comorbidity of seizures, which we know is high prevalence, right?
Yeah. So his criteria for having autism was very short and limited and profound. And then as more research was applied to it, so did our understanding of it, and our criteria has changed. So, and I honestly believe that they will still change. There will be more criteria added to it once we have a better definition and a far more clear understanding of what it truly is and how and why people have it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we also have to remember that originally it was thought of as being caused by bad parenting, which is going to our number 10.
Yes.
And so people were afraid to say, right? Like you felt like you had done something wrong.
Yeah. And I think that comes from you were unable to connect with your child on an emotional level, like not having that, that physical sense of, loving connection, right? No hugs, no kisses, no eye contact, right? So when people see you interact with a person where they don't want to be hugged and they don't want to be kissed and they don't want to be touched, people automatically assume that this is a bad relationship, right?
Right. So
it's
that is number 10.
Unsafe relationship, and therefore they go, oh, you must be a bad parent for your child not to love you. So, and I think just having, somebody display those type of sensory needs is automatically, presumed and viewed as, not liking the parent that you're with.
Right. So number 10 is autism is caused by bad parenting, which we just talked about. No, that's it. We were referred to as refrigerator parents.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
Right, that we were cold, and that must be why we have cold children that don't want to be touched and don't want to be held and all of those kinds of things. And no, you cannot cause autism by whatever parenting style you use. You are born with autism.
Yep, and you just got to embrace it.
Right. And people have to remember too that kids are dynamic, right? Who Peter was at 2 is not who Peter is at 16.
Yeah, and that's going to change when he is 22 or 25. So, and I'm sure that your relationship with him is going to evolve and change as he grows, as it does with any neurotypical family. So, yeah. Well, I think it also helps us understand our next podcast that we're going to do is parenting. And I think that is, it's going to be, a bit of an info dump for, we're going to try and cover as much parenting tips in our next podcast for parents to be able to have, some great strategies to put into their toolboxes in dealing with certain, behavior or situations or just to have a great knowledge base as well. So I think we have a lot of information to share in relating to being a parent of an autistic child.
Absolutely. Hope people tune in for that one.
Absolutely.
Thanks for tuning in. If you know someone who might find this episode helpful, feel free to share. Also, check out our website and socials linked in the description.